Hey, and welcome to the Friday Habit. On
How's,
a Today is a Thursday, but it's my birthday today, and because of that, I thought that it'd be appropriate, or actually, really, Ben thought it would be appropriate for us to celebrate that a little bit here and have a
yeah,
conversation a little bit about my life. But also, I thought, hey, why don't we go live on Facebook, my page, because it is my birthday.
yeah,
So if you're listening to this, we'll make sure that the video of this is up on our YouTube page, so that you guys can watch this as well as enjoy the audio version if you're just tuning into our podcast.
yeah. Awesome, dude. I'm super excited to do this. I have lots of questions for you. I want to kind of dive in and learn more about your life, how you've gotten to this point, and I'm just happy to be able to hang out with you on your birthday. So, I got a icebreaker question for you as usual. You
Okay.
ready? Are you ready for this?
I'm always ready for the icebreaker
All
question.
right, cool. Would you rather live one life that lasts 1,000 years or live 10 lives that last 100 years each?
Oh wait, say that again now. Would I rather live one life, 10,000 years,
Yep, that's right. Or
or
live 10 lives of 100 years each.
ooh.
Yeah.
Now is it the same life that I'm living? In the sense of, am I the same person, or is it like I'm being reincarnated into another person, but I get to keep all
Hmm.
my memories and emotions and feelings? Because it's almost
I
like the same thing, right? If I live
yeah.
for 10,000 years, then I essentially get to see all the technology and all the things that take place. But if I live
Yep.
100 years, it might be more fun to live 100 years of one life 1,000
Mhm.
times, because then it's like, if you're like, yeah, I'm ready for a reboot on this sucker, you can just at a
Yeah,
hundred you just die, and then it's like you come back as somebody else, is like you got another shot. And then if you could
man.
keep
I
all your
yeah.
knowledge.
Dude, that's what I think that would be amazing because I'm always like wanting to try new things and it'd be like your life could become an experiment. Nobody actually gets like two shots like that. And if you had the opportunity to learn from all that stuff, start
hmm
over and actually keep some of your knowledge, that would be pretty epic.
I think it would be pretty epic.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's a goal for you, on your birthday today as you're looking back. Then hey, think about what you've learned and pretend that you are starting over today and live the rest of your life like you have another shot.
I I I like that, Ben. I think
That's
that's
my
a
attempt at an inspirational. All right, hey, let's move on to something more important. Would you rather be without elbows or without knees?
good question. I think that I would rather be without knees, because
Okay.
I think about all the times you bend your arms within a day to
Yeah.
do certain things, feed
Uh-huh.
yourself, anything like
Uh-huh.
that. I could walk around like a wooden soldier all day, and I don't think it'd be that big of a deal. You'd get used to it after a while, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I know this wasn't one of the options, but I think I would prefer to have one bendable knee and one bendable elbow and then one one straight arm.
That
So I could kind of hop around if I need to, and then I still have one usable arm and then like one useless arm and leg.
that sounds pretty ridiculous. And it seems clunky. Like after a while, you'd be just stumbling out everywhere like this broken robot.
Yes, that would be ridiculous. All right. So, just a quick note if you're listening to this and you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review in the Apple Podcast app. Really helps us reach more people and grow our community. And normally, our community, we're talking about business related stuff. We are going to cover some business related stuff today, but mostly I just want to kind of celebrate Mark and also just get some of his backstory because I think as entrepreneurs and business owners, it's cool to kind of see where other people have come from and where they've ended up, how their past has shaped who they are now, what they've learned. So I want to get into some of that stuff, asking Mark some questions today. So, Mark, let's dive in. Are you ready?
I'm so ready. I
All right.
Yeah, I'm ready. It's interesting because um I have another podcast called How'd You Get Here, and it's usually me interviewing people uh on their stories on how they got to where they are. You know, everybody, whether you're a successful business person or a entrepreneur or a creative, has some sort of story. And I feel like a lot of times people think that, oh, I could never do X, Y, and Z because I came from a certain background, or, you know, they probably had some sort of silver spoon or advantage that I didn't have. And so what happens when we hear other people's stories is that it encourages us and reminds us that, you know, we're not so far from where we want to be, and we have what it takes within us to be successful. And so I'm usually the one on the other side of this interview asking people questions. So I think it's fun, and it's endearing to me that you, as my friend, want to interview me on the podcast. And, you know, hopefully my story would encourage, you know, anyone who listens to this. So.
Yeah. All right, let's start at the very beginning. What are some of your first memories? Like, what's the first memory you actually can go back to in your mind?
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, I think that we try to remember certain things from our past or experiences, and I've kind of done that exercise to kind of think back, like, how far back can I remember? And it's kind of weird. Like, one of my biggest memories, or like one of the first things I can think back to, is I was probably 2 years old, maybe 3 years old, and I remember making snow angels
Hmm.
in the like little lawn area. My dad used to live in a trailer park when I was really young like that, and I just remember this like memory of me just like, and it was nighttime, or like maybe 5 o'clock in
Hmm.
the winter, so it was dark, and I just remember like making a snow angel, which is kind of like weird, but
That's cool.
that's like my first memory.
Making the snow angel. That's the first thing you remember ever doing. That's awesome.
Yeah, what's your first memory?
Oh, well, the show isn't about me, but let's
I
see.
know, but now I'm curious, like,
Yeah,
what is the
yeah.
very first thing you can
Uh,
remember?
I think the very first thing I remember, I think it was like my second or third birthday, and I had a sandbox out back, and I remember my birthday getting like some like little like earth mover kind of, I forget what they're called, but like kind of like a backhoe, but it's not a backhoe. I can't think of what it's called. Bulldozer. It was like a little bulldozer toy, you know. And I was playing with in the sand out there. I think I remember my dad coming home on my birthday. I was out there playing. He came out on the back deck, and he would always like take his shirt off and like beat his chest like Tarzan. That's such a random thing. But I think he would do that when he came home and be like, "I'm home," and he would like pretend to be Tarzan. I don't really know why, but and just being excited that my dad was home. You know, I think that was probably
Hmm,
my earliest memory.
nice.
I was in Alabama. Where were you?
I was in Colorado, actually.
Okay,
Yeah. I think Broomfield, Colorado. You know, where my dad used to live back then. So
that that's really cool.
yeah.
So what was your childhood like? I know some stuff, and when you told me some of this stuff, I was like, "What in the world?" So everybody, buckle up. There's some stuff coming up that you wouldn't expect, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, what was your childhood like? You know, from that memory on, like in the next few years growing up, what was that
Yeah.
like?
You know, this was a very interesting, you know, story, and you know, I would say probably one of the reasons why, um, I had some success on American Idol, back in the day, because it is such a unique story. Um, but you know, my parents back in 1981 had me, and shortly after that they split up, and my mom, kind of a free spirited hippie type person, you know, took my sister and I with her to California. My dad in his early 30s, late 20s. You know, just a young kid, really, when I look back on it now that I'm 40.
Yep.
um, you know, was kind of left alone in Colorado,
Hmm.
and so I don't have many memories of that time. You know, that was essentially from the time I was, um, you know, really small, like maybe a year old or something like that, until I was about 2 or 3 years old. So I lived with my mom during that time when I was a really young, you know, baby. and then my dad just felt like, he became a Christian and kind of changed his life, and was kind of on this path of restoration in his own life.
Mhm.
And so he just felt like, hey, it's not right for me to be estranged from my family, and I need to kind of like restore this, relationship. And so, he went out to California, where he kind of had some leads of where we might be. And, when I was living with my mom, we lived in all sorts of weird places. Some might call them like crack houses, or just really dilapidated communities. And then as well as like Hare Krishna temples and other types of communities that would bring us in and feed us and stuff. We were really poor. But my dad kind of found my sister and I in this really destitute situation and brought us to Colorado. And then, I had kind of had memories of my mom, but I, didn't really know her, but kind of remembered her, and lived with my dad until I was 4 years old. And then when I was 4 years old, my mom called my dad, said she was kind of coming through town and needed a place to stay. And he was like, all right, you can, stay for the night, and that's it. And then in the middle of the night, she took me, she kidnapped me. And, as a kid, I didn't really think about it, because, I knew her as my mom. But we were on the run for 6 years. So 6 years of my life, was kind of traveling from place to place. I spent most of my time in Hawaii, where we lived, just very impoverished and in all sorts of different situations, weird tree houses and junkyards, and just hung out with the most eccentric, strange people. And, kind of bounced around the islands of Hawaii. And then there was a season where my mom had this boyfriend, and he was from Alaska. And so we spent some time in Alaska and Fairbanks and Anchorage. And during this whole time, my dad was kind of looking for me and trying to find me. And he actually hired a private investigator to search for me because I was, a missing child. And so in 1991, when I was 10 years old, my dad found me, and we were living on Maui, and they ran this whole sting operation. And it was interesting because it was April 1st, and the principal comes to the office, or comes to the classroom, and says, hey, Mark, you need to come to the office. And being that it was April 1st, I was thinking that Denise, my mom, Denise, that maybe she was going to like pull me out of school early, and we were going to go have an adventure or whatever. And when I got to the principal's office, there was like 2 police officers there, and they're like, hey, do you know that you're kidnapped? And I instantly just started crying. I broke down and, freaked out. Because I had known that I was kidnapped. Denise would often threaten me, like if I was being a bad kid, she would often threaten me and be like, hey, I'm going to send you back to your dad if you don't behave. And I would be like, no, don't. Because as a kid, my dad was very, he was very like tough. He was very hard-hearted. He grew up in a very abusive home. And he never learned how to love, and so there wasn't really a tender side to him. And then also he had a lot of, worries and fears about us turning out like Denise, and so he was always kind of overprotective and overbearing and over controlling because he was afraid that, that we would, become drug addicts and, really screw up our lives. And because of that, he was really tough on us. And I think because he didn't know how to love, he just responded in a way that was always angry or, frustrated. And as a kid, I kind of picked up on that energy a lot. And I always just thought of him as being kind of like mean, and so Denise would always threaten me like, hey, I'm going to send you back. So anyways, when they found me, it was like, oh, the gig's up. And they took photos of me and faxed them back to Colorado, and they put me in this foster home. And they kind of just stripped me away right away, and then brought me back to Colorado, and that's where, for the first time, I was reunited with my dad and my sister, who I hadn't seen in 6 years.
So your dad literally didn't even know if you're alive at that point, right? So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that he had kind of known, because as they were
Mhm.
as he had hired these private investigators to like find me, I was in and out of school, so I wasn't like
Okay.
consistently in a school. And Denise would change my name, or call me different things like that. And they had
Mm.
actually found me when I was in Alaska, actually, and my dad told me the story that they had actually found me while I was in Alaska. And the company that he was working with at the time was going to do some sort of like extreme, like a re-kidnapping of me kind of thing to get me back. And so, he essentially was, he's like, I think that'll be too traumatizing, which it probably would have. And I'm thankful that didn't happen. And so, yeah, I mean, that's that portion of my life. And like I said, during that time, I experienced a lot of terrible things, saw a lot of terrible things. Denise really didn't have the most savory characters as friends. And I was exposed to a lot of things that kids shouldn't be exposed to. So,
Mm.
yeah.
What were you like as a kid? Like your personality in that kind of time? Did you shut down? Did you come to life? Like, did you like the adventure? Like, what were you like as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Denise was a very eccentric, carefree type person. She was just this wild flower power person. It was like everything was some sort of sign, and every interaction. So it was just, as a kid, I was very bubbly and happy, and the entertainer, um, tender-hearted. I think I wasn't really um, somebody who was introverted or anything like that. I was definitely an extroverted type person. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I think as a kid, I just remember trying to be the life of a party, make people laugh. And then I also had the ability to sing at a young age. I kind of had a self-awareness of
Mm.
my voice, being able to the sound above average, as I like to
Mhm.
tell people. Um, and so, I kind of, would sing a lot, was into the Beatles and Elvis and music and things like that. So,
Did anybody teach you? Did you have any like vocal coach or anything like that, or was it more like just self-taught? You just kind of picked
yeah,
it up because you knew
yeah,
it
it
sounded
was,
good.
yeah, it was all kind of self-taught. And then, but it was like, I understood that the reaction that I was getting from people when I was singing was like a very positive reaction. Like it was like a
Mhm.
surprise,
Yeah.
like, oh wow, this,
Yeah.
8-year-old kid, 9-year-old kid, like, can actually like sing,
Mhm.
like, and I remember actually when I first came to, back to Colorado, um, my dad was going to a particular church, and we started going to this church, and he put me into the choir.
Mhm.
And the choir was going to have this really, like, big choir event at this retirement home, and they'd been working on it for months and months and months. And so when I joined the choir, the teacher was like, well, unfortunately, like, you don't know the songs, and this event's next week. And so I was just like, hey, if I learn all the songs, could I be in the choir? And I'm like 10 years old, but I got my little cassette tape of all the songs, and I like listened to them as I was, going to sleep every night, and I was memorizing the songs. And then, like, before they got on the bus to go to this, recital, the choir teacher was like, all right, like, you think you memorize these songs, kids? Like, all right, go ahead, And I like sang the songs back to him, and he was taken aback by my voice, one, because he hadn't heard me sing yet, and then that I'd memorized all these songs, and then he like was like tearing up, like physically, like starting to like get emotional and cry, and I was
Wow.
like, oh wow, like, this is cool,
Mm. What made you so motivated to do that? To like get in with that choir? What kind of was driving you?
I mean, I think it was one is I was kind of like this odd man out. I had come not knowing anybody, moving to Colorado as a little kid, being taken away from the only family I knew. And, um, I think it was just something that this idea of like, okay, like I know that if I put my mind to this thing, I can like do this, like this is like my
Mhm.
gifting or my skill set. Like, let me like prove everybody wrong.
Mm. Yeah. So what was that like then, changing, living with your dad and kind of growing up? And then I'd love to hear about kind of that transition into like, what was your first job?
Yeah.
What does that go like?
Yeah, so again, it's like another chapter. Yeah, I think if I ever write a book, right, there'll be like these
Yeah.
chapters
Yeah.
of these stories,
Part
and
one.
so
Yeah.
yeah, uh, so then that kind of brings us to the second scene of I'm 10 years old and disconnected from Denise, really wasn't able to say like bye to her or anything like that. Did some family counseling as a kid. We'd go to this space and they would allow us to talk on the phone
Hmm.
to Denise. And the thing is that she had kind of been lying to me like my whole life. Like there were so many things that like even her name, like in different arenas, she may be Lakshmi or she may be Genevieve. She kind of had like people knew her by different names. So and then even her age, like one of the things that really like hurt me the most, like impacted me the most, was that she had lied to me about her age. Like
Mm.
I remember having birthday parties for her, celebrating like her 24th birthday or something like that, right? When
Mm.
really she's like 34 or something like that.
Yeah. Wow.
And as a
Huh.
kid, I didn't think like I wasn't like,
Yeah.
oh, what year were you born? Whatever. It's like, oh, we're
Yeah.
having a party for my mom. She's 24. Like,
Yeah.
okay, like none of that
Yeah.
stuff made. And so when someone's like, no, Denise, is her name,
Yeah.
and like she's
Mm.
34 years old or however old she was, it was like, no, she's not. Like we had her birthday last year and she's like 20.
Uh,
It's like,
wow.
and so
So
like,
yeah, you were
yeah,
in it deep. Like there was you didn't even know what was real and wasn't real at
yeah,
that point. But
exactly. It
somehow,
was it
yeah,
was crazy, man. It was
yeah,
so weird. And it was a 10-year-old kid. It's like, what the heck?
yeah.
Um and so there was like this really difficult period, I think, when I was really young like that, like 10 from 10 years old to um
Do you
12, like yeah,
do you feel
what?
like that does that change like how you see the world or people ever? Like the idea that you were in something for 6 years and you thought that was the reality, and then you had a complete perspective shift. Does that make you more cautious, or does it make you wonder, what else could happen like that? Or I mean,
No, I think what it does really is it gives me empathy for a lot of different people and situations, and it allows me to kind of like see the perspective. Like
mm,
sometimes we hear these stories on the news. We hear these. Like how could they ever do this? And for me, like I think back and they're like, oh, they must be some malicious psychopath. And then I think
mhm,
back to maybe situations that I experienced. I was like, well, I knew some people that weren't malicious psychopaths that did X, Y, and Z. So I wouldn't
mhm,
necessarily go down that path right away.
right.
And so I think, if anything, it's given me more empathy to understand like where someone else may be coming from for a particular situation and not judge so harshly into a situation,
Mm.
without getting all the facts and understanding all the different things.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So from there, as this kind of being the next chapter, where did that take you? I know that you kind of pursued some of the singing, and I want to get into the band and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But like, what comes next? Did you start working some jobs in a career? Did you pursue music, or what happened next?
Yeah. So at 10 years old, got really involved with a church, made a lot of good friends, started singing regularly, would enter into like national singing competitions and different things like that as a kid, within our little, sphere. Um, and kind of live that life, and at the time my dad was very he was still pretty afraid that my sister and I would turn out like Denise, and he still didn't have a capacity to, be tender and loving to kids, because he was never modeled that and never showed that. And so he was really tough on my sister and I, and did a lot of things that I'm sure that he would take back if he could. And then a lot of times, because of the church we were involved in, and the religious nature of the church that we were in, it was this idea of, if you spare the rod, you're going to spoil the child, so he thought, well, if I discipline these kids enough, they'll like turn out okay and be good, but as a kid, I just felt that, it was more abusive and it was more hurtful, and so I really lived the double life, in the sense of, I was kind of living in fear at home, and as a kid, kind of always walking on eggshells and being afraid of, like, when is my next, spanking going to come, or when is, like, I'm going to do something wrong, and then, my dad's going to fly off the handle and be angry with me and punish me unproportionate or improportionate to, the thing that I did wrong or whatever. And so that kind of went on for, a lot of years. And then when I was 14 years old, I was a freshman in high school, and there was Little Caesars Pizza. And at Little Caesars Pizza, if I got a worker's permit from my counselor, I could get a job at Little Caesars Pizza. And so I went to my counselor and was like, hey, I want to start working. And really, it was like a way for me to get out of the house. It's like, all right, if I'm not home, then I can't get abused. I can't, get hurt. And so I got a worker's permit and, went up and really hit it off with the manager there. I was kind of a nerd. I loved like Star Trek and Star Wars, and was just kind of into all this nerdy stuff. And so was he. And it's funny because, he's like, I think minimum wage was like $4.25, and he's like, I like you, Mark. I'm going to give you $4.50 an hour. I was like, yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. I was like, this is awesome. I was like so excited. And so started working at Little Caesars Pizza, and I absolutely loved it. It was like my first job, and it was a way for me to get out of the house, and I could make some money, and then I started meeting other people, that were kind of my age. And I remember very vividly, Creed was playing on the radio. So this dates me. Creed was on the radio, and I was like washing the dishes or something like that, and I was singing this song. And then there was like this other guy, at Little Caesars, who was also singing the song, and he sounded pretty good too. And I was like, "Hey, man, like you sing?" He's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I sing," and we kind of just hit it off. And he was like, "Hey, do you want to come to youth group with me?" And again, it was like another thing to get me out of the house, and less opportunity for me to be punished or get in trouble for something. And, my dad had kind of left this church that he was a part of that was, very legalistic and fundamentalist and, really abrasive church. And he'd kind of left and was kind of on his own discovery path of like what was next for him and his faith and all that. And so he was kind of open to the idea of me, going to youth group. And you have to like understand, like, when I lived with Denise, it was like I was like I would cuss like a sailor as a little kid. Like I had a foul mouth, I was like this street kid, this hood rat from like Hawaii, like, and it was always like, we were broke, and it was like I got to get mine, it was like this mentality of like, if I don't take it, like, I'm not going to get it. And like, I mean, I would steal hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of toys from the store, and like I was just like this really like broken down poor kid who, was struggling, and like I said, like cussing like a sailor and doing all this other kind of stuff. And, when I moved in with my dad, it was like a complete opposite.
Whiplash.
It was
Like,
like he was going to church 3 days a week, and like dressing up on Sunday, and wearing suits and all this other kind of stuff. And then I wasn't allowed to like listen to any music, and music was like a huge part of my life, in childhood. And it was just like you can only listen to hymns, and I couldn't even listen to like Christian rock, like DC Talk or Jars of Clay, like. And I remember, I was kind of saving my money and whatnot, and I had bought like this Discman, and I went to Walmart and I bought this like this really cool Discman, like had like skip protection and all these like things. You remember those, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And so I got this Discman, and then I had a buddy at school who was really into music, and he had brought me some CDs like Elvis and the Beatles' White Album, which is one of my favorite records, and I would like sneak listen to this music. And the same thing, like when I was walking to work or walking to school in the morning, I would sneak listen to the radio, because I wasn't allowed to listen to non hymn music. It was like, so I was kind of like sneaking music and listening. I'd babysit my cousin, and my aunt kind of knew how intense my dad was, and she would like leave out CDs of like Sheryl Crow and Warren G, and I would like I'd put my cousin to sleep, and then I would like listen to music all night. And so I remember this one time where my dad, like, he I had this starter jacket. I don't know if you remember the starter jackets from back in the 90s. It was like the puffy jacket that had like a big pouch in the front that Velcroed, and you'd get your favorite sports team and have this like puffy jacket. And so I had the CD player in this jacket, and somehow the play button got pushed, and I was like leaving the house, and he was like, he could hear it. He's like, "What is that?" And I was like, "Oh." And he like found the CD player, and like it had like a Elvis CD in it or something like that, and he was like furious with me, and he like took it away. And I had lied. I said, "Oh, that's my friend's like CD player and his CD, like, please, like." So after a few days, I was like, can I just take it back to him at school? And I, took the CD player back, and, like diverted that catastrophe. But yeah, so started going to youth group, and, with a buddy of mine, and, we were able to just spend time together at work and at youth group, and really found a core group of friends there. Many of them I'm still friends with, to this day and know. And when in the youth group, they actually let the kids lead all the music. And so there was like this graduating class of like all the seniors led the music, and they were all graduating. And so it was like, okay, we need to get a new group of kids to do the music. And so, my friends and I, we had one friend who kind of played acoustic guitar a little bit already. We had one friend who was played quads like in drumline, at school. Mm-hmm. And then my buddy I worked with, he's like, well, I'll learn how to play guitar. And I was like, well, I sing because that's what I do, so I'll do that. And so we started this band into youth group, when we were sophomores in high school, freshman and sophomore in high school, and we just started, doing our thing. Uh-oh. You know what time it is? I hear the train.
I didn't get to the mute button quick enough. It's too
That's
late.
All right. That's right. All right. For anyone who's tuning in, Ben's offices are near a train yard, and so from time to time you'll hear that train whistle, and that is my cue to play our train song.
It's part of our brand at this point.
That's right. Anyways, and so we started a band, and just started learning church songs and things like that, and playing music, and that was a great escape for me. My junior year of high school, me and this other kid, Isaac was his name. We started, dabbling into like writing our own music, and doing some performances. There was this thing at our school called Night of the Stars, and it was like a talent show. And him and I, he had this background of gymnastics, and so him and I like put together this act. There was a song back in the mid '90s called "Jesus Freak" by this band DC Talk, and it was kind of like this mix of like rock and rap, and it was actually a crossover hit. They were playing it on like, the secular rock station here in Colorado. And so it was like kind of like this big song. And so we did this song and we choreographed this whole thing. I was wearing like this white, wife beater like shirt, and I don't think that's probably appropriate to say anymore, but that kind of shirt, baggy black jeans, and we did this whole choreographed dance, and he like flipped over me, and we were doing all stuff, and it was like nuts. Like the crowd went crazy, like standing ovation, and I was like, this is what I want to do with my life, like,
nice.
Like this is it,
Yep.
And so, yeah, so kind of started just getting really involved with music and whatnot. And, during this whole time, my dad still kind of cold and disconnected and really tough on us, abusive, to some extent. And my junior year of high school, he'd remarried. He had married this woman, and she was really tough because she kind of had her own kids and just kind of wanted her life with my dad and her kids, and so it really ostracized my sister and I, and it really became one of those classic like evil stepmother situations. And so then also too, like with my dad being like, well, now I no longer have to be both parents. I feel like before he had got married, he was a little, there was like an understanding where like he may be tough on us or like a little bit unreasonable. And then maybe he would think like, you know what, like it's just, my kids and me. So I got to figure out how do I try to be, emotional or intimate with these guys.
Yeah.
But once he got married, that kind of all turned off. It was like, well, the woman is supposed to be the caretaker and the sympathetic one, and then the dad is supposed to be the ruler,
Yeah.
And that was even that much more tough, for my sister and I. And actually, my sister left home 2 years before I did, and after she had left home, it put the spotlight on me, and then things just got really bad, this lady that he was married to, would just do really just crazy stuff, like, I won't go into all the details, but it wasn't good. And it was very hurtful. And, there was a point, early, when I was 16 years old, and, it was something like I had forgot to lock the door or something like that, like some weird thing. And we got in this big fight, and, I felt like for the first time, like, I should just open up and I should just, just share my feelings, and
yeah.
And I was just like, you don't even know who I am. Like I had this double life. Like I would go and be fun and happy and, just have a really good time with my friends and, be the jokester and entertain. And then it was like I would come home and I'd be afraid and, scared and sad. And so, got in this huge fight, blew up. And, my stepmom at the time, she was like, well, why don't you just leave? And I was like, well, what do you mean just leave? Like, I don't want you guys to get in trouble or anything like that, And then she looked at me and she's like, what are you, chicken? And I like just had my jacket, grabbed my jacket, and I left. And I never went back. And I essentially ran away from home when I was 16.
Wow.
And kind of just tried to figure things out. The first thing
Did you have contact with them after that, or is it more like, did they know where you went? Did you talk to them, or are you just like, I'm out?
No. Yeah, so I actually I went up to my work and and I just started crying. I was like, guys, I just ran away from home. And you know, they were real like, oh my gosh, and they kind of had known like the pretty oppressive situation that I was in, and they're, you know, they kind of like instantly went into action, you know, to try to like figure things out for me. You know, my one friend Isaac, he had an older brother at the time, and he like took me to Target and like bought me like all new clothes and stuff like that, and then my friend James, who was in the band with me, he like talked to his parents and was like, hey, my friend like needs help. And then I like lived with them for like 3 months. And, you know, my dad had kind of found out where I was, and, you know, he would call that family and be like, you know, tell Mark when he comes home, it's going to be 10 times worse. And it's going to be, you know, super hard for him. And so it was like, and so they were like, well, we're not going to send him back, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, at that point it was like, you know, social services had to get involved, and I you know, ended up living with a foster family as kind of my guardians, and so I lived in that foster home until I graduated high school. You know, and I think one of the beautiful things about that whole story with my dad, and it's hard to talk about it really, because you know, I'm actually really close with my dad now.
Yeah.
And sorry.
You're good, man.
I didn't think I was gonna cry.
Love you, man. Happy birthday. Made you cry on your birthday. Yeah. You're welcome.
Thanks. So yeah, you know, because my dad and I are really close now, and I think one of the cool things, and you know, one of the you know, one of the cool things is that, you know, I never thought I'd have a relationship with my dad again. You know, I thought, you know, he was too far gone, and, you know, he was too prideful, and, you know, that he was, you know, too hard-hearted, and I'd never have a relationship with him. And I didn't, maybe it was like 6 years almost, and I hadn't talked to him, and, you know, for whatever reason, it got put on my heart to like reach out to him, and I reached out to him, and you know, he's like, well, why don't you come over? He's living in Colorado still at the time, and we sat down for a few hours, and I was able just to confront him, you know, on everything that he ever done to like hurt me, or that I felt, you know, was unreasonable. And I think, you know, at the time I just felt like, you know, I was an adult now, and I could, you know, be okay with whatever. And it was cool because, you know, he gave me an answer. Like, he'd either say like, hey, I'm sorry, like I was wrong, like he'd apologize to me, or he would give me an explanation. He would give me a reason, you know, like, hey, you know, the reason why I, you know, did X, Y, and Z was because, you know, I thought I was doing the right thing. You know, like at the time, you know, I thought that I was, you know, doing my best, and you know, and so it was one of those things where I was able to kind of get closure from a lot of that hurt and pain that I kind of experienced as a kid, you know, as a young teen, and it kind of allowed me to kind of start building this road to redemption and relationship, you know, with him, and so now what's cool is that him and I are really close, and I love him dearly, and you know, he's a fantastic grandfather, and his wife now, his current wife, is amazing, and she's you know, really great grandma to my kids.
Wow.
And it's really cool because, you know, I look at my kids and I think like, you know, all I ever wanted for them was, you know, a better life, you know, and a normal life, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's cool that they get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been to your house. I've met your family, and I've told you this before, but I'm just really, if I didn't even know your backstory, I would be impressed of how good of a dad you are, you know, and how you when you're with your kids and your family, you're 100% there and you make it fun to be in a family, and I know you even say things to your kids when you drop them off at school. Maybe it annoys them, maybe it doesn't, but it's an awesome saying. Do you mind sharing what that is? What you tell your kids every time before they get on
No.
the?
Yeah. So every day when we drop them off for school, I always tell them, I'm like, be a leader, make a difference, stand up for what is right, help those who can't help themselves, make the best of every situation, stay positive. You're awesome.
Dude,
And I usually
and
say
it's
you're
just
awesome like
evolved.
3 times.
It usually evolves. It's evolved over time, right? You just started saying one of those things, and you
Yeah,
just kept adding to it,
exactly.
right?
Be a
Yeah.
leader. And then it was like, make a difference. And then now it's like, I need a good, 2-3 minute lead before they leave the door so I can get all the things out and said to them. So,
I just think that's so cool that you're able to come out of such a hard kind of situation and be able to turn that around and just basically, well, two things. One is I think things that I'm hearing from you that are so meaningful is that, and I've heard this from other people too, is that if you're a dad or if you're a parent and your kids come to you and say, "Hey, you really hurt me," don't be prideful. Like, apologize. Like that means the world. Even if you screwed everything up, if you can be humble enough to apologize to your kid, like that means so much. So
yeah.
I think that's awesome. And then I just feel like the other thing is just like nobody has had such a crazy life that they can't have hope, you know what I mean? And turn things around and be able to create that awesome like family life that you guys have. Your wife is awesome and your kids are great. And they're so, when I came and stayed with you guys and they were just like so polite and just like even excited to see me. I'm just like a random adult, I think, to them, but they were like, they talked with me, and just like they were just really cool kids. And I think that's comes down to you, being able to be a great dad. So,
Yeah, I appreciate that,
yeah.
Yeah, and so um it's cool because I've been able to share my story with a lot of people, and to kind of move to that next chapter of my life is that that band that I was in, we kept writing our own music and kept performing, and we ended up competing in this national band competition, and put on by the Gospel Music Association, and we ended up winning first place. And so we were able to record like a 4-song EP, and we started releasing music, and really like started to develop as musicians and creatives, and started to recognize that, wow, like we have something special here. And at the time, as we were winning that competition, everyone was kind of like a freshman in college. And after we'd won that, it was kind of like one of these things like, you know what, I think we should just all go all in on music and like pursue a career as musicians. And so we did that. And, we ended up getting signed, and, everything I'd ever dreamed about as a kid, I got to, I achieved, like being on the radio and, traveling from coast to coast. And it was just a really fun season of my life as, a young, 20s, to just kind of, you have adventures with your best friends and play music for a living. And one of the things that was great is that I got to share my story. I got to share my story on a consistent basis of, hey, you know what? It doesn't matter like where you came from, because I came from probably some of the most worst situations a person can come from, and it doesn't matter, who someone tells you who you are, because you can, your past doesn't define your future, and if you believe it, you can achieve it, and it's like a lot of these corny like motivational things, but I was like a walking example of, I didn't ever allow my past to define what my future was going to be, because my past would tell me I should be, some 500-pound like crack addict with like a needle in my arm somewhere, like that's what my past was telling me that I should be. But, I had more hope for my future, and, could say that no matter how difficult the situation is, that that God has a plan for your life, and that if you stay positive and you make the best of every situation, like you can have success, you know. And so I feel very fortunate that I was able to do that. You know, for a decade I was in that band, and you know, our CDs were released all over the world, and you know, I
When you told me about some of the bands that you traveled with, I was like, oh my gosh, like I was listening to those bands. I probably heard your music too. You know what I mean? Like that's crazy.
yeah, we did have a top 25 single on Christian radio. So, and you can still find us on Spotify and stuff and iTunes. Foolish Things was the name of the band.
Yeah, I have it saved in my library, and it's funny because I can like, you know, you have people that are like, oh yeah, I was in a band. You're like, oh cool, yeah, I love to hear your music sometime. But there's not that many people that you know personally that you could play their music and people would not realize it was your friend. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so I can play your music in the house, and everybody's like, oh, Ben's listening to the radio because it's like high quality. You know,
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, who recorded themselves on their iPhone in the bathroom or something. You know what I mean, or whatever.
Right.
So, yeah,
cool.
it's yeah, I just want people to know it's like it's not just like, oh, I was in a band. I was like, no, this was a successful band. That's crazy. You guys were able to make a living off of that and travel as a band.
Yeah, you know,
that's a huge success.
It is. It's a cool season of my life, and you know, and then it kind of goes into the next chapter of, you know, when the band was breaking up. You know, everyone was kind of you know, getting married, starting to have kids. And you know, people just started wanting different things and to go different directions, and we ended up breaking up, and that was really hard for me because, you know, that's all I'd ever wanted to do, and I thought that that's all that I was, you know, capable of doing, and you know, so when the band broke up, I was like, crap, like what am I gonna do with my life? You know, like I have no skills, you know, like I've sung my whole life for a living, and I had a friend who was a photographer. And he needed a video for this thing, and he's like, hey, do you think you could learn video? And I was like, well, you know, I think so. And this was back in like 2007, you know, before there was really a solid YouTube with tutorial videos on, you know, how to do things. So I was like going to the library and getting books on video editing and you know, video production and all these other kind of things. And then I got a job. I loved Mac computers. And so I was like, all right, what can I do with Apple computers with someone with no college education, with, you know, a terrible, you know, elementary education and high school education. I wasn't, you know, with that smart of a kid. I couldn't read that well. I couldn't spell that well. I was terrible at all these things. And so I was like, what am I going to do? And so I got a job in retail, just, you know, selling computers, and picked up a camera and started teaching myself editing softwares. And I just kind of like threw myself out there, you know, and worked a day job, and nights and weekends kind of just hustled and shot videos, got into doing like wedding films and wedding photography and stuff like that, because it was something that I could kind of do on the weekends, and then at nights I could edit videos and whatnot. And then as I got into video, it was kind of like one of those things where people would be like, oh, hey, you do video? Like, I need a video for this, and could you do a video for that? And I just started working, you know, I'd work during the day, nights and weekends, I'd, you know, hustle doing my side projects, and I did that for many years. And kind of every job I had, I went from Apple, working in the retail store, and then because they liked me so much, they ended up sending me to Cupertino, California, where I got certified as a Apple hardware and software technician, which then gave me this new skill set, you know, and this new little piece of, you know, line on my resume of Apple certified technician, which I'm grateful for. And, you know, did the retail thing for 3 years. And then, opportunity opened up for me to, go work at the Remax World headquarters in the IT department. And so during this time, my dad and I were kind of rebuilding our relationship. You know, we were kind of connecting. He was still living here in town. And then he moved to Texas. And he had called me and he said, hey, he was a huge fan of the TV show American Idol. And so he had called me and he said, hey, American Idol is coming to Denver. And I didn't follow the show. I really wasn't a fan of American Idol. But he said, hey, listen, if I drive up, you know, to Colorado, like, would you try out? And I was like, I don't know, Dad. I'm not like really into the show. That's kind of not my thing. I was like a singer. I like write my own music and sing, and I was never like a cover artist. And to this day, people are like, oh, you're a singer, like sing this song. It's like, I wasn't like in a cover band in a bar. Like I was
Right.
writing all original music. Um, and so, he kind of persisted. And so he ended up driving up. He's living in Texas at the time. He drove up from Texas. And then we went to the Mile High Stadium here in Colorado. And there was like 12,000 people, like wanting to get in and try out for American Idol just here in Denver. And we waited in line and, got there. And, the stadium is filled. It's crazy. And the way that they do these interviews is they have these massive blocks of like 16 people, like 20 tents, like on the football field, like 20 tents deep, 16 people in these little cubes, and you step up for like 15 seconds and sing a piece of a song and then step back in line. And then they
Wow.
tell you, all right, you're all acts next. And they just crank through 12,000 people in a day.
Wow.
And I went, I got my 15 seconds and I stepped back in line, and then they're like, give us 15 more seconds. And then I stood up, 15 more seconds, and they were like, all right, you three, you're out of here. And then they like move me to like the next round. And what you don't see on TV and the way they make it seem is that like all 12,000 people try out for the judges. But really it's one of those things where they vet, all 12,000. That season, 120,000 people tried out for American Idol,
Wow.
like all across the country, right?
Yeah.
And then I just kept making it past these rounds, and then I ended up making it to the celebrity round, which is really cool because now when you Google my name, it's on YouTube, and you can kind of see my audition of me trying out for American Idol and making it to Hollywood. I got my golden ticket out of 120,000 people that tried out that year. I made it into a group of less than 100, and and so that was kind of like almost like the cherry on top of my musical career, being being in a Christian band that didn't have massive success. It's like nobody knows about that, but there was a season after my episode aired, like I couldn't even go to the mall without people being like, dude, you're the guy from American Idol. I
Really?
saw you on
Oh, man.
TV, and it was really cool. And, I made it to Hollywood. I got a really cool experience, an all paid trip. And, I ended up making it past a few rounds in Hollywood, and then I got axed in the group rounds. And so, it was one of those things where it was like that cherry on top where I could kind of close my music career and be at peace with that. And honestly, like when I got axed from American Idol, I was like depressed. I was like in the just the deepest of despairs, because in my mind I was thinking like, oh, like this is why I was a musician. Like my whole life has brought me to this moment to be on TV, and like do American Idol, and like and then when I got axed, it was like, nope, that wasn't your purpose. And it was like devastating,
Yeah.
And but again, I went back to work, and I just showed up every day, and I made the best of every situation. I stayed positive, and continued to do my thing. And then in 2016, I was working. I'd been working for a few years at this real estate tech startup. I was the director of creative media, and the first week of January of 2016, I got laid off. They had some huge funding not come in, and I got laid off. No severance. I hardly had any savings. I got 3 kids, a mortgage, and I'm like, crap, what am I gonna do?
Just to clarify, did you get married when you were in the band or before you started the band? Is that when you got married?
Yeah, I got married when I was 24 years old. Got married while I was in the band, so it was kind of fun. My wife would probably say different. Our first year of marriage, like she was on the road traveling with us, selling merch and doing all that kind of stuff.
So how long were you married when the band broke up?
So we'd been married for 4 years.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
so
4 or 5 years.
Okay, gotcha. Cool.
And now we've been married for going on 17. So
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
But but yeah, so I got laid off and was like, what am I gonna do? You know.
Yeah.
But I had been faithful for years working a job, and I've been faithful for years, like just doing my side hustle. And I just decided to take the leap of faith. And it was one of those things where I'd always lived my life without regrets, right? Like, there was times where I would be singing in the shower, and I'd be like, oh, I could make it on American Idol, I could be that. And I tried it, and I can say, you know what? Hey, I didn't have what it took to be the top 24. Same thing with the band. It was like, people are like, oh, do you regret that you didn't go to college or like didn't learn some sort of hard skill or whatnot? And I, I always felt like, you know what? If ever I find a passion for something that I need a college education for, like I could go back to school, but the opportunity to be young and not have a lot of responsibilities and be in a band, like that's not going to happen again.
Yeah.
And so this point where it's like, okay, I now had this like director title at this job. I could probably
Hmm.
go get another job, making decent
Hmm.
money and doing that. But it was like, you know what? Let me just try to do the Brand Viva thing. Let me just see
Hmm.
what I can do. I have these skills. I've learned so much. Let me see if I can, like do my own thing, because I know that if I don't, I'm gonna have regrets. Like I'm gonna,
Yeah.
look back and be like, oh, could I have done my own thing?
Yep.
And so I went all in. I got laid off the first week of January of 2016, and I went all in. And there was hard times. There was like, times where it was like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my mortgage.
Yeah.
And my license plate says expect, because it's another kind of, mantra of my life to like expect the blessing, like expect that things are going to work out, expect that expect that people don't have malicious, intention, expect that everything's going to be okay. And because there was times when in that first few years where I wouldn't know, like, I wouldn't have enough money to pay my mortgage, right? And I didn't have any jobs on the horizon. And then I'd have all this fear and anxiety and worry, like, how are things going to work out? How are, things going to, how I'm going to pay my bills? And then like 2 weeks later, somebody would call me and be like, hey, I got this big job, $7,000. Do you think you could do it? And I'd be like, yeah, I can do it. And then that started happening enough to where I started to say, if I lived a life where I expected things to like work out, like I would have less stress, I would have less worry. And if I was more present, like in a moment, and enjoyed like the things that were going on, like my family's happy and healthy, and I have my health and I have a roof over my head and we have food. Like if I was in these moments, like life was good, right? Like when you wake up and you're present in the moment that you're in, like you don't have any worries. Like there's no cares, right? But it's when you
Mm.
start to project in the future and start thinking about what could go wrong and what are the pitfalls of a situation. That's when you start to have doubts and fears and worry and anxiety and all these other kind of things. It's when you're focused
Mm.
too much on something that doesn't even exist. And if you think about like our emotions and our feelings, and I've said this before, it's like our emotions and feelings are easily tricked, right? You watch a movie and you get scared, or you watch a movie and you cry, and it's not real. It's fake, right? But your emotions don't know that. It's just what you're inputting into your mind. Your emotions are responding, appropriately to that. And so a lot of times in our own situations, in my situations, I'd be putting things in and they would cause me to respond in a certain way. And then things would work out and I'd be like, man, I would have just, if I should start living my life like things are going to work out. Like expect the blessing, expect that things are going to work out, because I'll have way more like peace in this moment each and every day and have a lot more happiness in my life if I'm just
Hmm.
present, and not thinking about tomorrow. And then when
Yeah.
stressful situations arise or things come up that cause me to get anxiety, like to pause and look back and say, okay, like I gonna be at peace and I'm gonna just expect that things are gonna work out. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're also a hard worker too. So I think that type of philosophy especially works well for you because there's no, I mean, you work hard, you enjoy work, you out greatly work and that kind of stuff. So it's like, why overthink it? Why worry about it? You know, and you say don't worry about it and expect the best. You're not saying like, all right, fold my arms, sit back. Ah, bring me something great. You know, you're working hard for it and putting yourself out there. So that makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense.
Well, and I think that's something that's very important, you know. And I always encourage young entrepreneurs and people, you know, who want to go off and do their own thing right away, you know, like, yeah, I want to like quit my job and like do my own thing. And it's like, okay, well, that's good, but in some ways maybe you need to be present in that moment and not try to pursue your own thing at this time. You know, I think about, you know, if I would have started Brand Viva any sooner than I did, and you know, thankfully I got laid off because I was in my mind, I had started mentally preparing, like, you know what, I think I'm going to try to go do my own thing, you know, but I'm going to save up enough money so I have a nice security blanket to go do my own thing. But I got laid off, which threw me into it. But I think about, like, if I hadn't worked at Apple, if I hadn't worked at Remax, if I hadn't worked at that real estate tech company, like, I wouldn't have the knowledge and the skills, and I wouldn't have the relationships that I had that allowed me to be super successful as Brand Viva.
Yeah.
You know, all the success I ever that we've ever had at Brand Viva has been through relationships. You know, it's been through, you know, people that I have known, and through us producing good work and then getting referrals and growing that way. And I wouldn't have that if I hadn't worked those jobs. And so a lot of times I think we need to ask ourselves, like, am I wanting to leave because I'm frustrated with the situation, or it would just be easier if I was gone? Or do I need to learn something from this moment, you know? And and a lot of that, even with work that we do, right? Like, okay, I have this client that's difficult. Like, is this something where I'm supposed to be learning a lesson from this? Like, if I remove this difficulty, like, I'm not going to learn something from it. But if I push through that pain, there's a lesson on the other side that then I can learn from and then grow and better myself, you know, in the future.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that's one of the only things that keeps me going sometimes when there's a really tough project that comes up and something goes wrong and we're like, okay, we got to go above and beyond and fix this for our client, you know, and maybe it's a hard time for a while to get that kind of stuff done. But yeah, looking back, if you keep in your mind that you are actually um, learning a lesson that's going to be with you for the rest of your business career, then it's like, wow, this is actually worth it. Like, this is a gift. Like, this challenge is actually a gift, so that I can learn something from it and avoid it in the future or improve as a person. So that's awesome. Well, yeah. So now you have a company, you have a team. We were talking just before we started recording how you have the freedom to kind of do what you want with your time to push the company forward. You don't have to do day-to-day stuff. So it's amazing. Like, we're just thinking, like, where if we start at the beginning of this story, you know, being kidnapped, living in Hawaii, your dad not knowing where you were, you know, and the whole journey you've gone through. It's amazing to see, like, this is where you're at now in life. Like, that's amazing. Do you feel like you're living the dream now? Do you feel like, hey, I'm happy, or do you feel like, oh, I got to keep pushing? Like, where are you at in your mind with like where you are in life?
I mean, I feel very blessed. You know, I think about, you know, where I could be, and I have,
Mm-hmm.
you know, 3 beautiful children, um, and I have an amazing wife, and I just feel so fortunate. Every day I wake up and I just feel so blessed. And I think gratitude is another important aspect of you know, having a good life, and being content and happy, is because, you know, when you can be thankful for even the small things, you know, like that, man, I have a warm water, like I have a warm shower, like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like I have a meal, like some of these small things, like when you can live in that space,
Mm-hmm.
it gives you appreciation, and it gives you kind of motivation each and every day to like keep going. And kind of like what we were saying before, you know, we started the podcast. You know, I don't think that I don't think you ever arrive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that the times in my life when I've thought like, okay, I once I get here, then I'll be content and I'll be happy, and then I can rest. I don't think that I don't think we were made for that, you know, and I think that there's not really contentment and peace when you get that. And then what happens is we start living our life in a way that we're always looking for this next thing. And then we get that next thing and it doesn't fulfill us like we want. And then it's like this next thing that we put our eyes on and our hearts on. And then what we start to do is we start to miss out on these little opportunities in between, and we start to miss out on life. And then all of a sudden you wake up and you are like, what have I done with my life? What have I always been looking for, this milestone moment that I missed out on all these beautiful little things that took place in between? And so I really feel that you know, that I haven't arrived, but that gives me the strength, and it gives me the energy and power to want to pursue something else and to continue to grow. And like, you know, there always is this next thing, but there's always this like excitement for the journey, you know, where it's like, oh man, I'm excited for what's going to be in between now and that thing. And what do I have to do in order to get to, you know, where I want to go. And then just find those little moments on that journey that are so fulfilling, and so it's such a blessing, you know, to our lives.
Well, I was going to ask you for a parting piece of advice, but I think that was it.
Yeah, I think that was it. That was the parting advice.
I didn't take notes and pull any takeaways from this, but I can remember a couple off the top of my head that I think are helpful.
Yeah.
One, apologize to your children. Be humble. Apologize to your kids if you need to. I think enjoy the journey. The last one you just said is huge. And I think also not worrying unnecessarily about what's coming up. If you're working hard and you're doing what you can do, don't worry about the stuff you can't control. Just thinking about the stuff you can control, and that's all you can do. So don't worry about the next day. Just do what you can right now.
Yeah, I love that. Hey, thanks so much, you guys, for hanging out with us. If you're watching us on Facebook Live right now, I see some friends, Jeff, Cade, Rose. Thank you guys for tuning in, and everyone else who is watching us and hanging out with us, you know, this past hour. If you're interested more about what Ben and I talk about and want to follow us, actually go to thefridayhabit.com, and there you can find all about what the Friday Habit is. You can subscribe to our podcast. You can get show notes for episodes, and you can also get access to our PDF that explains what the Friday Habit system is. It's going to show you how to set aside one full day each week to dedicate working on your business instead of in your business.
Yeah, and if you all enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you get notified when new episodes come out. And we'd love to get a review from you in the Apple Podcast app. You can leave Mark a happy birthday message in your review. And if you have any questions or topics you want us to cover, don't forget to record us a quick voice memo and email it to hello@thefridayhabit.com.
That's right. And until next time, live every day like it's Friday.